Okay, go ahead.
At this time, I'd like to reconvene the regular board meeting. Clerk of the board, please call roll.
Hall,
Present.
Solis,
Present.
Pike. Mr. Pike?
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you are. Yes,
I'm here.
thank you. Tarantino,
Here.
Segura,
Here.
Aguirre. Dr. Aguirre? Where did he go?
Here.
There he is. And Adamos?
Here.
Okay, so now we'll have a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance. If we could all stand for the moment of silence, please, for a minute. Okay, there's the flag. Place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under
indivisible,
God, indivisible,
Indivisible.
liberty
and justice.
and justice for all.
Thank you. The board took the following action. Moved by Hall, seconded by Solis, to approve the request for leave of absence for one certificated employee with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Hall, seconded by Solis, to approve the request for leave of absence for one certificated employee with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Hall yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Solis, seconded by Pike, to approve the resignation agreement and general release with one certificated.
What the hell is that? Smoke alarm?
Sound like it.
Smoke detector?
Moved by Solis, seconded by Pike, to approve the resignation agreement and general release with one certificated employee with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Agreement. Am I right there, Deanne?
I
Is it-
think you read them all.
Okay. Yeah, I had one on there that I needed to cross out. Okay, at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the August 10th, 2020 regular board meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Moved by
I'll
Hall.
second.
Moved by Pike, seconded by Ms. Trustee Hall. Count goes for the vote, please.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes,
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
thank you. We will now provide an opportunity for the SDCOE representative, Dr. Mark Scabranda, to make any comments.
No comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will now have an update from our acting superintendent, Dr. Getty.
Thank you, President Segura. Good evening and welcome to the first Board of Trustees meeting after having started the 2020-2021 school year. Last week, we were the first school district in San Diego County to begin our most unprecedented school year. And what a school year it will likely be. The level of stress and anxiety among our stakeholders, our students, our parents, teachers, support staff, principals, and the district office was palpable. Once we began the school year, every day seemed to bring more understanding and familiarity with our distance learning model. While we had our share of challenges, we must take a moment to acknowledge all the work that went into preparing for the beginning of school year. Thank you to each and every single person who went above and beyond to ensure we were ready to welcome our students. Patience and flexibility were certainly our go-to motto last week and will continue to be. We're all going through this pandemic together and doing our absolute best, and we want to thank everybody. A special note to say thank you to our registrars and our IT staff for their Herculean efforts to ensure our students were registered and ready to log into class. As Dr. Alvarez, Dr. Winters, and I visited many of our schools on the first day of class, it was a bit eerie on campus with our students present only in a virtual environment. It became evident that all the hard work of our reopening working groups made up of our administrators, our teachers, counselors, classified staff, and parents into preparing for reopening certainly helped to support our students, families, and staff. As a follow-up to last board meeting, I want to share that we have met twice since our last meeting with stakeholder groups committed to taking action to improve the lives of our African American students. First, we held a follow-up meeting with administrators and representatives from Sweetwater Education Association, planning for actions resulting in champions and data analysis on every campus to support our African American students. Then Thursday last week, Dr. Fulcher and I held a meeting with Black Minds Matter group made up of staff and community members in the spirit of fostering a system-wide collaboration. We also invited Bonita Vista High School teacher Don Dumas and San Diego County Office of Education Equity Representative Dr. Fabiola Bagula to join us. And we appreciated that our very own Assistant Superintendent of Equity, Culture, and Student Support Services, Dr. Joe Fulcher, facilitated the meeting. These two meetings were timely follow-ups to our July 17th meeting conversations with our African American students and our recent alumni as well. Our staff and our board are committed to turning these conversations into action, addressing historic and systemic issues impacting the achievement of our African American students, as well as staff. Lastly, we continue to work with our team to improve our district systems to support the teaching and learning of our students. We're in a truly unique school year, and we must all think differently and continue to exercise patience, flexibility, and empathy with one another. We appreciate all of our employee and community partners working together to meet this moment. I know that together we will meet the rigors of our circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Getty. We'll now have a report from our student board representative, Desiree Adamos.
Good afternoon, board. Once again, my name is Desiree Adamos. I'm the student board representative. I have met with the high school ASB presidents last Friday, and I'm going to meet with the middle school ASB presidents this Friday. We discussed how schools in our district are overcoming the distance learning, the new environment, and a lot of the ASB presidents have, vocalized their concerns with not having counselors and having trouble with registration and technology issues. And, we kind of discussed what the district is doing on their behalf to, work through these situations. And we are also trying to cultivate school spirit despite distance learning. And we also discussed how to provide mental health resources to students in our school sites, despite not being physically on campus or being physically with counselors and school psychologists and everything of those matters. Additionally, students in our district have felt the need to vocalize more concerns, especially during this time, this unprecedented situation. We have a large movement of students that are pushing for ethnic studies in the 2021-2022 school year. There is a petition going around currently with 200 signatures. I have spoken with UCSD professors, and we kind of worked through, ideas on professional development trainings for teachers to teach ethnic studies in a culturally sensitive fashion. Additionally, we have formed a student coalition of student organizers at different school sites that are pushing for ethnic studies. And I can give you guys an update on that on the next board meeting. And besides from that, that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, now let's move down to D1, conduct a public hearing and adopt annual resolution numbers 2493 and 2581 for transfer of funds. I will now open the public hearing. Are there any speakers?
Yes, I have comments from one speaker. These are from Kathleen Cheers. Are there any specific amounts you are planning to borrow from each department? I, as a member of the community, would prefer to know what the financial strategy is. Thank you. There are no further comments.
Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. Do I have a motion to approve board agenda item D1?
I'll make a motion.
Moved by Mr. Pike. I'll second.
So Lee second.
Motion by Pikes, seconded by Solis. Call for the vote.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
This is the point on the agenda where members of the public may address the board on any matter not on the agenda and have 3 minutes each to do so. The Board of Trustees cannot legally take action on or respond to matters not posted on the public agenda, but will refer the matters to the superintendent's office for review and report. Speaker's comments shall refrain from use profanity and shall be presented in a respectful manner. Thank you for your cooperation. Clerk of the board, will you please read the items? Oh, yeah, that's where we're at. Yeah.
Oh, here, yes, let me start the public comments.
Yes.
The first comments are from, there's 4 people's names on the comment card. It's Audie De Castro, Estela Matriano, Herb De Lute, and Maria Fontemayor. In late June, Mary Rose Peralta was demoted from principal of Chula Vista High School to principal of Chula Vista Middle School after a safe, pre-approved event at a Chula Vista High School football field. Similarly, assistant principal Jason Josephat of Palomar High School was also demoted back to the classroom. These decisions by the Sweetwater Union High School District Board and Superintendent Moises Getty reveal a systemic issue that hinders the advancement of Filipinos, the second largest minority group in the region, in your school district. Mary Rose Peralta is a beloved and respected educator, having been awarded Woman of the Year in Education by Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez and Administrator of the Year by the Association of California Administrators. Jason Josephat was also just as accomplished. He was awarded District Teacher of the Year. Their demotion signifies the school district board's lack of consideration for equity and representation in leadership. Because of the egregious decision to demote Mary Rose Peralta and Jason Josephat, we, the Filipino community, are making the following demands. Reinstate Mary Rose Peralta and Jason Josephat to their rightful positions or the equivalent administrative positions by the superintendent and school district board in the upcoming August 10th board meeting. A formal correction or apology in a statement by the superintendent and the school district board to the Filipino American community. The creation of a Filipino American Advisory Council by next school district board meeting. The responsibilities of the advisory council will include the development of an equity oversight committee with other Sweetwater Union High School District stakeholders to ensure that all students receive an excellent education as well as equal opportunity and diversity, equal hiring and advancement for faculty and personnel, the implementation of equity in the curriculum and support for Filipino American students. If these demands are not met, then the community will continue to mobilize and protest. We will not stop until these issues are discussed and resolved with the school district board. The next comments are from Cynthia Suero Gabler. Good afternoon, honorable board members. My name is Cynthia Suero Gabler, and I am a community advocate for the Bay Terrace Phil Am Senior Association, of which many have grandchildren attending schools within the Sweetwater Union High School District. I am also an alumni of Montgomery High School and Palomar High School. I am writing you to share my vast disappointment in the recent unfair demotion of Mary Rose Peralta from Chula Vista High School principal to Chula Vista Middle School principal, as well as Jason Josephat's demotion from vice principal at Palomar High School to classroom teacher. These two highly regarded Filipino American educators are shining stars and role models to our Filipino community and especially to our youth, and are the pride and joy of our senior community. As you know, Filipinos make up a large percentage of residents in the South Bay area. We are educated, tax-paying citizens, and many of us are professionals in business, medical field, education, and military. Our youth need to see role models that they can relate to and identify with, and demoting accomplished educators is downright despicable. How dare you make the decision and announce these demotions at your last board meeting without due process? This racial injustice and racial inequity are simply unacceptable. Your practices or lack thereof is downright disgusting, and I, among many others, are outraged. Your lack of transparency and lack of consideration for the Filipino American community reflects why the Sweetwater Union High School District Board of Directors have been under scrutiny for so long. The school district needs to provide fair and equitable representation in its hiring practices, including leadership positions. You have the opportunity to make right what you have done wrong. You have the chance to turn this around and show our Filipino American community that you value our voice, our culture, our educators, and our students. I ask that you reinstate Principal Peralta and Mr. Josephat to their prior positions or positions of their previous lateral pay and title, and that moving forward, you consider the Filipino American community as it relates to fair and equitable representation and hiring practices. I hope that you make the right decision to listen and learn with empathy and make the necessary changes expeditiously. Quote, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The next comments are from Dolores Balane. She submitted these comments in Tagalog, and I translated them to English via Google Translate. Dear Acting Superintendent and Sweetwater School Board, I am Dolores Balane, a retired teacher of the Sweetwater Union High School District and a member of the Council for Teaching Filipino Language and Culture. I was deeply saddened and deeply hurt when I learned that Mary Rose Peralta, principal of Chula Vista High School, had suddenly been transferred to a middle school. This is a clear demotion for a leader who is hardworking, efficient, and has good relations with coworkers and students in all the schools in the district she serves. I worked with Mary Rose when she was the coordinator of foreign languages in the district when Filipino teachers did the Filipino language curriculum and evaluation. Her leadership in multilingual activities has resulted in many benefits in the foreign language programs in the district, not only in Filipino, but also in other foreign languages. As president of CTFLC, Ms. Peralta has promoted the preparation of teachers who can teach Filipino at Sweetwater by providing support, training, and equipment to them. Under her leadership, students were encouraged to participate in community activities such as Filipino cultural celebrations. Ms. Peralta encouraged the goodness of teachers and especially of students. Ms. Peralta is a respected member of the community for its involvement in educational and civic activities. She has received awards from community organizations as well as professional organizations. Her achievements are proof that she deserves the recognition and respect of her employer, the Sweetwater School District, and not the unjust demotion. The community, students, parents, and other organizations are seeking an explanation for this action by the acting superintendent and school board. Ms. Mary Rose Peralta for her high school principal. The next comments are from Evangeline Meneses. I am submitting my comments on behalf of Mary Rose Peralta, who has been a highly respected and recognized effective administrator at Chula Vista High School, who was demoted in position and suffered a loss of salary in what appears to be a move that did not involve her due process. I ask you, the Board of Trustees, to do your due diligence and closely examine the process and revisit the rationale for her transfer, demotion, and reduction in pay. According to news accounts, quote, the district said principal's transfer was routine, not the result of disciplinary action, end quote. If this statement were true, why the demotion? Why the reduction in pay and consequently a reduction in future pension benefits? How does an interim superintendent newly appointed to the position the previous week determine in such a short span of time that such drastic change in leadership needs to be made immediately? If this unfair move was made to assuage the complaints of parents from other high schools, then you as the board are not following your own written policy and procedure regarding complaints and the timelines as outlined. The district is already under great scrutiny for its fiscal malfeasance and suffers from a reputation of cronyism, bias, and highly questionable practices. Now you are at risk of implementing and wholeheartedly supporting policies and or processes that appear to be capricious, discriminatory, and retaliatory. Reinstate Mary Rose Peralta to her former position immediately as you conduct a serious investigation of the process and unfortunate outcome. You have an opportunity to demonstrate to the community that you as a board have the capacity to operate with transparency, integrity, and fairness. You owe it to your students and the community you are duly elected to serve. The next comments are from Felix Chuyay. I am writing in support of Mary Rose Peralta. I have known Ms. Peralta for over 15 years as a dedicated, caring, and professional educator. I have seen firsthand her successful work with students of all grade levels. Besides her academic and teaching experience, Ms. Peralta is very sensitive to their social, health, and personal needs. She maintains strong working relationships with parents, teachers, staff, and administrators. She is highly respected. Ms. Peralta is also very active in the community. She was one of the founding faculty of the Filipino school in San Diego. She is an active member of various educational and political associations that advocate for local, state, and national needs of the Filipino American community. In summary, I hope you would reinstate Ms. Mary Rose Peralta as principal of Chula Vista High School. The next comments are from Jacob Veritas. I am a graduate of the Sweetwater Union High School District, specifically from Sweetwater High School and Granger Junior High School. I'm currently a young adult author on Amazon, the creator of House of Soul Alpha. Ms. Mary Rose Peralta was the principal at Granger during my time there as a student. She was instrumental in pushing for class instruction innovation, leading the school to be recognized as a schools to watch. Ms. Peralta encouraged students to perform at their best to escape poverty and follow their dreams. Junior high is a formative time, and I believe Ms. Peralta's push for accelerated learning helped me reach my full cognitive potential. She's encouraged me to attend college no matter what, so I give her credit for being one of my early role models. I yearned for freedom, and so I worked hard in school to prepare for my career. I graduated Order of Omega, top 3% of IFC students from San Diego State University, and I produce content for social media from all major news networks that generate more than 10 million views per month. Ms. Peralta deserves her position back as well as a public apology, or the community will not relent in finding out the truth. The next comments are from Joe Garbanzos. Dear Mr. Segura, the University of the Philippines Alumni Association in San Diego is a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization. It represents the UP alumni as a group in the San Diego County. Many alums and their families are South Bay residents. Many of our children go to Sweetwater Union High School District. Many alums are teachers in the district. Our community roots make us a major constituency in a culturally diverse district. We share the same aspiration for an effective school district. The cases of Mary Rose Peralta and Jason Josephat may raise many questions. We respect the district's administration domain to manage and achieve its mission. We, however, request that communication from your office and the superintendent be conducted in a culturally mindful way. The district's actions on Mary Rose and Jason were seen by many as lacking due process, maybe punitive, and culturally tone deaf. As we all strive for better results, we ask for due diligence. With an aim of building better community relationship and communication, we offer the following suggestions. 1, an independent examination and a public report on the Mary Rose Peralta and Jason Josephat cases. Based on the findings, initiate appropriate corrective measures to remedy and improve staffing management process. 2, create an advisory body of Filipino American students and parents to offer policy input on issues facing the district. 3, initiate culturally sensitive outreach programs to Asian American Pacific Islander community. The cases of Mary Rose and Jason are an opportunity to learn and strive for better outcomes. At the end of the day, we all share similar community goals. We look forward to hearing from you. The next comments are from Joe Masares. Dear Interim Superintendent Moises Getty and Sweetwater Board of Trustees, like many of my Kababayans before you today, I write here about my extreme discontent in your decision to demote Ms. Mary Rose Peralta as principal of Chula Vista High School and Dr. Jason Josephat as assistant principal of Palomar High School. As an active alum of Montgomery Senior High School, I am ashamed in the manner of how this announcement was conducted, which falsely undermines the mission and beliefs of the district. As posted on the district website, Sweetwater Belief Statement suggests, we believe each student can succeed. We believe in a welcoming community that is inclusive, equitable, and promotes positive academic, social, and emotional well-being. We believe relationships and collaboration matter. We believe resources shall be equitably distributed to ensure the success of each student. We believe in the value of community voice in decision-making. We believe in a culture of trust based on integrity and transparency. Clearly, your collective action has been up to this day counterintuitive to these beliefs. Trust has been broken. Not directly addressing this issue, mass transparency, devalues the voice of the community, incites an equitable environment across all stakeholders, and more importantly, has harmed the success of students and their families at these two schools and of the district. Filipinos make up the second largest student ethnic population and a fairly significant population of 12,000 plus registered voters in the district. Our voice and votes count not only today, but well into the future. I stand along with the over 8,000 petitioners demanding that both individuals be reinstated and bring justice back to the mission and beliefs of Sweetwater Unified High School District. The next comments are from Joyce Temporal. Good evening, board members and superintendent. My name is Joyce Temporal. I am a Filipino American, a South Bay community member, and a member of the board of directors of Silayan Filipina National Organization. I've known Miss Mary Rose Peralta for decades. Not only is she a great educator, she is a great person. My father, Miguel Guevas Temporal, served in the U.S. Navy in 1954 and immigrated to the U.S. so that our family could have the best quality of life and education here. My 4 siblings and I were born in the U.S. and were all products of Sweetwater Union High School District from elementary to high school. At that time, we didn't even have a principal or administrator that even looked like us at school. And now, over 35 years later, there is only one Filipino American high school principal in Sweetwater District schools. Only one. It's a travesty that the Sweetwater Union High School District demoted former Chula Vista High School principal Mary Rose Peralta, one of the most qualified and beloved principals who has inspired so many students, teachers, and staff. She must be immediately reinstated to her previous position as principal of Chula Vista High School. It's appalling that Sweetwater would demote one of our Filipino American community's heralded members, who was one of only 2 Filipino high school principals in the entire district. Now there remains only one. Why? The superintendent and board will be held accountable to explain why, in a city, county, and state where Filipinos are the largest Asian Pacific Islander population, that there is only one Filipino American high school principal in your school district. Filipinos are grossly underrepresented, especially during our nation's current movements for inclusion and greater representation of communities of color, and in light of Sweetwater Union High School District's abysmal record of diversity and representation of Filipino administrators in its school system, the Sweetwater Union High School District should be ashamed of itself. You should be motivated to actively increase representation of Filipino Americans in all ranks, from teachers to especially administrators. Instead, the superintendent and school board are decreasing Filipino representation of Filipino high school principals. Stop playing politics and have some integrity. People have already lost faith in the board and district administration, and this action of Ms. Peralta's demotion only adds to the distrust and lack of confidence that parents, students, and the community have in the district's leadership. You must do the just and righteous thing, respect the Filipino American community, and reinstate Mary Rose Peralta to her original position as Chula Vista High School's principal. The Sweetwater District Superintendent and School Board must act now. Justice delayed is justice denied. The next comments are from Kathleen Cheers. I would like to thank Trustee Solis for listening to questions and concerns raised by the public and consistently asking the follow-up questions for clarification. Trustee Pike, you and Mr. Tarantino too deserve to be acknowledged for the respect you have always shown to members of the public in asking the follow-up questions. While I acknowledge it is not easy sitting on the dais being subjected to direct concerns and questions raised, the 3 of you have remained professional. You 3 continually offer the self-confidence it takes to listen, accept criticism, and not react in an unprofessional manner like rolling the eyes, smirking, refusing to look at the speaker, or cutting the speaker off. But then you 3 have always presented yourselves as confident and with nothing to hide. You 3 are respected because of your sincerity. Trustee Tarantino, I would like to publicly acknowledge the many in-depth questions you asked regarding counselors and the several issues brought to the board's attention. Your concern relative to the resources needed to ensure a quality education for our students and well-being of our counselors once again defines you. The next comments are from Maria Fontemayor. She also submitted her comments in Tagalog, and I translated them to English. To the members of the school board and to our interim superintendent, I am Maria Fontemayor, the current president of the Council for Teaching Filipino Language and Culture. I would like to express my heavy thoughts and regrets on the removal of Ms. Mary Rose Peralta as principal of Chula Vista High School and her transfer to Chula Vista Middle School. To me, this decision was unreasonable because in my view, it was a demotion. Ms. Peralta, former president of CTFLC, is not only an instrument and guide to the unity of its members, but also a reason why our organization, the students, the parents, and the community always work together. She always considers the welfare of everyone wherever she is. Or our organization is always active in socializing because of Ms. Peralta for the betterment of teaching and the well-being of students. She is one of the instructors in our annual practice of modern teaching methods. As a school servant, Ms. Peralta believes the welfare of her coworkers and students at school is more important than her own. Because of this, it is surprising and confusing that she was transferred or placed in a lower position as a principal in a middle school. If this is a common policy in the Sweetwater School District or an administrative basis, it is hard to believe and unacceptable. I am sure that the whole community trusts in Ms. Peralta, and I am joined by those who wish that she could be restored to her position as principal in a high school. I am confident that our community will not stop asking for and advancing to send her back to Chula Vista High School. If she is not reinstated as principal, hopefully she will be placed in a position equal to one being a principal. I hope the true spirit of fair and just decision prevails in the conduct of this case by Ms. Peralta and grant her what is real and due to her. Thank you very much. The next comments are from Maddie Adato. Board members and staff, I hope everyone had a wonderful start to the school year. I have received many messages and calls from parents complaining of a lot of IT glitches starting this new unknown territory. I do have a couple of questions, comments regarding the issues that many may be experiencing and hope that you listen and ask these questions as well. I think the district is still using Google Meets for their online meetings and classroom. However, Zoom has made many adjustments to their security and is a much better platform. Zoom has a waiting room where attendance can be taken and each student can be admitted to the classroom once this is completed. The classroom can be set up as a webinar for the first 20 minutes and then opened up for Q&A. Also, strict guidelines should have been sent to each student and parent to sign before they are allowed to enter the virtual classrooms. Ongoing mandatory tutorials should be given to teachers on improving the virtual classroom experience. Teachers that choose should be able to go to their classrooms and teach their virtual classroom from their site. However, to do that, safety precautions and disinfecting must occur nightly. Has the board received a plan for this? There are a lot of tools out there, so I hope that all of you are doing your research and really listening to what is being offered in the way of help or ideas. The next comments are from Michelle Ugarte. Good evening, Interim Superintendent Dr. Aguirre, Board President Segura, and other board members. I would like to start with giving recognition to the district in providing parents and staff with resources for distant learning. It has been very helpful, but I wish the resources for teachers could have been provided sooner instead of the 4 days before the start of school. I also want to show my appreciation for my principal, Easter Finley of Eastlake Middle School. 2 days before teachers reported, she provided optional PD for teachers because she knew teachers needed and wanted more support with using Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom, and other related items for distant learning, especially towards synchronous learning. Now I want to address the opening of school. I have been teaching for 20 years in this district, and I have to say this was like my first year of teaching all over again. I felt I was not prepared at all. I had more questions than answers of how to do things. The 3 days prior to school starting was nonstop and even into the weekend. The UCSD training was useless and a waste of time. I didn't want to know about the model that was created for distant learning. I wanted to know how to proceed with distant learning, especially with synchronous learning. The only thing I got out of it was one strategy and a title of a good book. I did attend the optional PD that was provided by the district and had wished this was provided more than the UCSD training, since it was more valuable and a variety of other trainings were offered at the same time. In addition to the meetings, teachers were expected to provide a lesson plan based on the UCSD training, which, by the way, information for this training was not sent out until 11 p.m. the night before, and asking teachers to bring a lesson for the afternoon session. The other 2 days were filled with PLC and staff meetings and setting up my Google Classroom and sending out codes to parents. My weekend was spent watching endless videos on YouTube to know how to use Google Classroom, Meets, and other related engagement add-ons and apps like Peer Deck, Nearpod, Edpuzzle, Flipgrid, and many others. In addition to watching videos, I was also practicing with colleagues in using and presenting in Teams or Meets meetings. My anxiety has also been through the roof. I have never felt my heart beating so fast and not being able to sleep because I was worried of how things will be. I am not the only teacher that experienced what I did. Others felt the same way and wished the district could have moved the start of school by at least another week or so. Think if we had not opened school yet, someone could have spent the time thinking about the security of Google Meets and wondering if students could access meetings before teachers logging in or enrolled in the class. and try and prevent the issues teachers and students have experienced in MEET's live class sessions and not being in the news every day for this past week, making the district look bad once again in the public eye. Thank you. The next comments are from Ms. Lee. Dear school board members, on behalf of Asian Pacific America Coalition, we are asking the board to take immediate action on the following. 1, reinstatement of Mary Rose Peralta to her position as principal at Chula Vista High School or an equivalent administrative position with same compensation as in the previous position. And 2, the establishment of Filipino American Education Advisory Council. Mary Rose Peralta was demoted from principal of Chula Vista High to principal of Chula Vista Middle School in June 2020. The Filipino American community perceived this action came after an event at a Chula Vista High School football field to which Mary Rose lifted the spirits of graduates through a fun, pre-approved photo shoot opportunity. I have known Mary Rose Peralta for over a decade. She is a hardworking and dedicated educator whose passion is to help students to succeed. She is a beloved and respected role model, educator, and leader for students, parents, staff in our community. She was named Administrator of the Year by the Association of California School Administrators. Demoting an accomplished and highly respected educator is not routine in nature. She has been the principal of Chula Vista High since 2013. The school board should have given Principal Peralta due process if there is something in the performance of her duty needs correction and improvement. The sudden demotion of Mary Rose Peralta is unfair to the students, parents, and the Filipino American educational community. With the current climate of demand for equity and representation, this action signifies the lack of consideration and sensitivity for the Filipino American sentiments of being discriminated against. Thank you for your consideration of our request. The next comments are from Nick Marinovich. Good evening. 3 quick comments. First, though, I apologized immediately via email when I stated in a CBOC report that all board members got union money for the 2014 campaign through PACs. I must state again, I was wrong and apologize for the error publicly. Member Pike did not have such donations in 2014. Unlike nearly all my CBOC chair reports, a special report which stated this information did not have any member or community member review. I strive for accuracy. I have requested copies of all the 2014 campaign forms from the registrar and will revise the report for accuracy. Second, now that I can speak as an individual on my views for a PLA, I am not against a PLA per se. I am pro-identifying its impact, both positive and negative, on the district, whether it be cost impacts on projects, better quality workers and construction, and more employment of local workers. If there is a cost increase, it should be weighed and against the benefits. Sometimes public spending must consider social benefits. Unions have a clear, important role in certain cases for society in general. All one has to do is how things were under Ed Brand and the importance of unions in fighting the bullying. The tactics of how some unions approach the PLA issue can be troubling as efforts are made to support or kill political careers based on whether they support a PLA. Moreover, it is recognized unions want union jobs and will support or oppose good projects just on this issue alone, i.e. whether a PLA is part of the deal. For instance, the convention center expansion was originally opposed by the unions until a PLA was part of the deal. It is the business of the Oversight Committee to review the PLA, and I will continue to speak my mind on this issue. The next comments are from Salvador Flor. I write this letter of support for both Mary Rose Peralta, former principal of Chula Vista High School, and Jason Josephat, former principal at Palomar High School, who were both demoted from administrative positions. This represented both a reduction in the scope of their responsibility as well as salary. I have read and supported the demand letter previously submitted to the board, which signatories included the organizations, the Filipino School, Filimita, CTFLC, and the Honorary Consul of the Philippines. These lead Filipino organizations have had a long history of advocacy for our Filipino American students in your district, as well as supporting the advancement of our teachers to higher levels of responsibility. Prior to my retirement from SDSU in June of 2010, I have worked with both Mary Rose Peralta and Jason Josephat in my role of advisor to Andres Bonifacio Samahan, a Filipino American student organization at SDSU. They actively supported your Filipino American students to attend our annual Samahan High School Conference. Now, as a Filipino board member, I have followed both their careers and have not been surprised as they rose through the ranks toward their roles as principals. They have both proven professional in their positions and are strong advocates of your district and our community. I was dismayed at the abruptness of your decision for their reassignment, as for the last few years, a reduction of Filipino principals have been reduced from a high of 7 to 3 in your district. This sends a message to your students and your staff and teachers that Filipino American teachers are not valued for their hard work and dedication and can be taken for granted. This lack of respect toward our community shows complete shallowness and your lack of awareness of our community as the second largest minority population in your district. It should be noted that this is the second letter of concern I have written to the Sweetwater Board of Trustees, and it was sent to Mr. Ernest Azohar, chairperson at that time, in regards to the needs of Filipino American students. On November 29, 1979, I co-authored a letter with the chairperson of the COPEO, the Council of Filipino American Organizations, Ms. Grace Blaskowski, and we highlighted the needs of our students to include the need for Filipino language classes, the social cycle needs of our students, the limited services for our English as a second language newly arrived students, the need for Filipino American history in our curriculum, and most importantly, the need for more teacher, counselors, and administrators. The importance of more positive role models for our students was paramount. Mary Rose Peralta and Jason Josephat are role models that we cannot just dismiss due to administrative expediency, and that they deserve due process and fairness. I hope that the interim superintendent, Moises Aguirre, the board president, Nicholas Segura, and board members collectively review all the sentiments of our community and address all the issues so relevant to the continuation of our students enrolled in your district. There are no further comments.
Can't hear you.
You're
Can't
muted,
hear you.
Mr. Segura.
You're muted.
Thank you for that. Clerk of the board, will you please read the items being pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes, the following items have been pulled. Item F3 by staff. Item F5 has been withdrawn by staff. Item F7 by the public. Item G3 by the public. Item K2 by staff and the public. Item M1 by staff and the public. Item M2 by the public. Item M3 by the public. Item N2 by the public. And item Q1 by the public.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Solis, second.
It's moved by Pike, seconded by Solis. Vote, please.
Adamos,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Solis,
Solis, yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, let's move to F3. And if I could just say something, I want to apologize to Mr. Tarantino. He had pulled D1, and I didn't give him a chance to speak on that. I moved that through kind of fast. Sorry there, Mr. Trustee Tarantino.
That's all right, Mr. Segura. I can ask that question under K2.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and go first, sir, if you would like. If you want to go under F3.
Okay. I'd just like to thank Dr. Gary for the meetings that he's conducted with various community groups, and the fact that he is committed to put into place an action plan which will address the issues of our various stakeholders in the community. And thank you for doing that. And if there's any way that all of us board members can help you in that endeavor, please let us know. Okay, that's all I have, President Segura.
Thank you, sir. I'll go. So I would just like to welcome everybody who has tuned into the, maybe not tuned in is the proper word for going to YouTube, who has found us on the YouTube channel. We are educating more than 36,000 students during these extraordinary times. I'd like to thank everybody on the front lines of our very first virtual school year, as well as all students, parents, and educators. Also, thank you for your patience, empathy, and flexibility, and for your communications for how to improve the implementation of new procedures and our software programs. We are listening to your concerns and suggestions. I would also like to thank Dr. Moises Aguirre, the superintendent, and his team for responding to these communications and taking a serious look at these ideas. I am too living the first ever virtual school year experience with my Castle Park High senior and IB student, Aurora. I asked her how it's going after her first week. She says, first thing out of her mouth was she said she missed seeing her friends and her teachers in person. It's just not the same online, but I understand it's not safe. Aurora is an A student and does her work and participates online. She has good connectivity and her own computer. What I worry about is our students that have other brothers and sisters who can bring distractions or computer connectivity issues. I would like to believe that we'll take this into consideration of these very students' need and possible technological difficulties, and show some flexibility as we move towards assessment down the line. I believe the students should not be punished for things that are out of control as they are learning in this virtual environment. And then I would just like to echo Mr. Tarantino's sentiments on some of the outreach we've done. I was online for the Filipino Leadership Forum, and that was very productive. I believe that, and I really just like to thank Dr. Getty for your action plans and your communication to the board members and how things are going. And with you, I think it's been 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, and it was quite a heck of a time to accept this responsibility. But I would just wanted to say thank you to that. And then in regards to the IT and the glitches or supposedly glitches with Google, could you just give us an update on what you're considering, if you're possibly considering using Zoom, and how that might go? And that's all I have. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next.
Mr. Pike.
I just have a couple of questions. I've been getting a lot of emails, and I would like to know if the independent study program have gotten their textbooks. I've gotten several inquiries, and I personally don't have any information on that. So I'm requesting that we find out or send us something that says how they're doing and if the kids got their books or not. And the second thing, along with you, Mr. Sakura, I'm just wondering about the Zoom availability. I've seen several comments by several people, including tonight, saying, hey, let us use Zoom. We can do a lot of stuff with Zoom. And so I'm just wondering, have we looked into that, and is that something feasible that we can do? That's all.
I can go next, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
I want to say the same thing. The concerns that have been brought up with regards to Zoom. I know a lot of teachers have been asking, and if it's a possibility, I know they've made a lot of changes in Zoom, so hopefully they fix those Zoom bombings. I know there's always going to be something, but if we can see if our teachers need it and they believe they can do a better job with that, then I say we look into that, because we want to give them all the tools possible to do what they do, and we know they do it well. And if they need Zoom, let's see if we can do this for them. And also with regards to the independent study and the learning centers, if we can get an update on how those are going and if everybody's where they're supposed to. Yes, I wanted to just thank all the teachers and all the counselors and everybody for getting this school year going. Appreciate all the hard work that's been put into. It's tough, especially having to be at home with kids, possibly, and teaching and counseling. So it's tough, and we truly appreciate that. I truly appreciate it. So keep up the good work, and hopefully it's it's a good year. All right, take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Solis. Ms. Hall?
Yes, I echo the remarks of everyone so far. I also would like to say very strongly, I real appreciation for our staff, the teachers, the counselors, the support personnel, not only in the central office, but at every school site. The classified workers are so key to the success. The registrars have been really a key part of us having our students ready. And I thank them for going the extra mile. I also thank the administrators of every school, the principals and assistant principals, the school psychologists, everyone, to make sure they've been reaching out to parents and teachers. And we really need to blanket our community with all kinds of different methods of communication, because we still have a few students out there. We may need to still be reaching. So I think that's key, that we continue in those efforts. And I'm thankful that we have dedicated staff that are doing that. I would also like to say that it's so important, not only for students and staff's well-being, that they understand how important it is to listen to each other. And if there's anyone that is experiencing a crisis or feels a real, like the teacher said in her comments, the anxiety of the moment, there are ways for you to reach out for help. And I think that is key, that there is somewhere that we have always on our website or in our classroom, keys to how they can reach out for help, and that we get them that help as quickly as possible. That is very key in everything we do. And I think one of the real methods for making sure that we have students that maybe we are not connecting with yet, other students are key in that work. So I think as students reach out, and Ms. Adamos, I know your other ASB presidents and people are all working through that as well, trying to make sure that every student in their school is participating in school. It's so important that we get everybody on board and move forward. And I thank everyone for their efforts in this. It is really trying to do everything online, but it is where we are because we need to keep each other safe. And I'm thankful to every staff member and to every student and family member that is willing to do their part, to wear masks if they're going out, but also to stay home and keep physically distant so that they're ensuring we can halt the spread of this disease. So everyone, I want to thank you for that. And I would also like to say, I echo Mr. Tarantino, for any of the forums that you hold or any of the, I'm willing to participate and listen. I did go and listen to a forum that was held by I think it was a town hall meeting that was held by our Filipino community a week and a half ago or so. It was very informative. I would continue. I always welcome those opportunities. So I think that's important that we continue to have that interaction. And anytime we have that, I hope they reach out to us so we can work through some of the challenges we have. But also, I do believe we are working on curriculum and moving forward to make sure that we have representation and that we do have curriculum that teaches students where their roots are and how they're, what the wonderful things that their heritage has to bring to the table. So with that, I thank you for this, and that's all I have.
You're muted.
How about F7?
Yes.
Yay.
I have one speaker. Comments are from Kathleen Cheers. In reviewing this agenda item, I noted while the saving projection is listed for the professional growth monies, there is no dollar amount savings offered for the proposed 3-chapter budget reductions. Respectfully, I ask why. One would think any action taken to offset our current deficit, which was partially caused by your leadership, would present detailed financial information savings amounts at every opportunity. Thank you. There are no further comments.
Any questions on this by the board? If I'm not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion approved.
Solis, second.
Motion approved by Mr. Pike and seconded by Mr. Solis. Call for the vote, please.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
G3.
I have one speaker. Comments are from Kathleen Cheers. I would like to thank Dr. Alvarez for her leadership in identifying a very critical need as it pertains to our younger students. These trainings, along with the expertise of so many of our teachers, will only serve to assist in helping our valuable students meet their educational goals. No further speakers.
Move to approve. Solis.
I'll second Pike.
Moved by Solis, seconded by Pike. Call for the vote.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
K2.
K2, I believe we'll do the staff presentation first, and then I do have comments from the public.
Okay.
Dr. Salkeld, I know she was having issues with her video, but we'll be able to hear her.
Thank you, Deanne. I'll go ahead and try and present now. Does everyone see the screen okay? Is that coming through?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, so good evening, President Segura, Board Trustees, Dr. Aguirre, Cabinet and Community. What we'll be reviewing today is the 45-day budget revision. What we've noted here on the overview are the key areas that the presentation will be focusing on, specifically the requirements by the state and the County Office of Education, as well as an overview. The first part of the presentation will highlight what was reflected in the enacted budget once the governor signed on June 29th, because that context is key in terms of where we pulled the numbers together for the budget revision, as well as an update to the multi-year projections. And then we'll also go through the cash flows because this budget has some significant impacts on the overall cash flow projections, and hence the item that the board took action earlier on the public hearing related to the threshold increase from 75% to 85% for the interfund borrowing. And we'll go through that detail here in a bit. And then we'll talk about next steps and looking ahead for the budget year for 2021. So we'd like to highlight here on this particular slide is that the Education Code doesn't necessarily require that a budget be revised at this point. But if there are revisions that are made, that we do need to bring them forward and made available to the public, and that the board take action on that. The governor did sign on June 29th, and how the Ed Code is noted is it has 45-day timeline, and hence it expires, or basically the timeline is on August 13th, and why we're bringing it to the board today on the 10th. What's unique is because these changes compared to prior years were so significant, and when we go over the particular slides on the financials, you'll see that, it's a significant swing, obviously to the positive from the aspect of the revenues, but most importantly then is the changes to the cash. And so with that, the County Office of Education issued guidance to the school districts here within the county on July 6th, noting that certain items would need to be considered given those significant changes. What's so unique for Sweetwater is because the district at the time of budget adoption, and given the prior year as well, has not met the minimum 2% economic uncertainties that's required in reserves. And with that, it required that district staff and management revisit the budget, but also prepare additional reports. It was almost in essence an interim that we do for May for the March, not actually for the May revision, the third interim. Actually, so it's a comparison, almost like the third interim, as well as budget development. So there were a lot more items that we had to put together. What you have in your executive package does reflect an updated, what we call the SACS report, the Standard Account Code Structure Report, only for the general fund. The requirement was only for the general fund, unrestricted and restricted, not the other funds that the district has. And we also had to prepare, just as we normally would at any budget or interim, is the technical review checks, updating all the criteria and standards, particularly since we had quite a few updates with our bargained agreements. We had to prepare only cash flows for the general fund and provide any updates to the assumption summary. So all of that information was also recently shared with the County Office of Ed. As we've normally have shared in prior presentations, the local control funding formula calculator was shared with the county office, and also this presentation and all of our financials. So they've been privy to this information prior to coming to the board for any feedback or guidance that they might provide. And I'll touch upon a few items during the presentation where there's guidance that they've provided not only to Sweetwater, but to other districts. So these next few slides cover the changes with the enacted budget. As I highlighted, it was certainly a drastic difference from May revision. You know, the governor and the legislature looked at this from different perspectives. We're going to touch upon what the changes mean to the revenues from that perspective, as well as deferrals, and how that impacts the balancing perspective done at the state, and then how it trickles down to school districts. Because certainly the governor was able to meet that compromise with the state legislature, but it does have some significant impacts that need to be accounted for. That is it's almost replicating a lot of what many of us experienced during or after the Great Recession. And the magnitude of the cash deferrals that I'll touch upon is significant. And so what you see on this slide here is taking those points in time. As I've shared previously, the budget's always a snapshot based on the most current and available assumptions. So you can see how this road has been since January through May, and then to the enacted budget. And still looking ahead for the remainder of this year can possibly change. And then definitely looking ahead into 21-22 budget development, which we'll get an update come January when the governor releases his proposal. So there's a lot of still some uncertainty looking ahead. But what you can see here, one key factor that went into the local control funding formula to the revenues is the cost of living adjustment. And I think it goes to the next slide, was not factored in, and I'll touch upon that here shortly. So when it comes to the Proposition 98 minimum guarantee, those funding levels are significantly different or lower for 1920 and 2021. The way in which it got balanced, it's a matter of kind of balancing those reductions at the state level, and how what this slide highlights is it's how those deferrals are managed, how it trickles into the budget at the state side of things, and how programs either may have been reduced or eliminated. But also one key factor, and we had shared this during the May revise as well as budget adoption, is the governor did exercise the withdrawal of the funds from the public school system stabilization account. That was under the rainy day fund, as noted here. Because again, the state had to balance a $54 billion shortfall. And so this was put in place through Proposition 2 during Governor Brown's era, but it had to be through an emergency proclamation that went into effect on June 25th. And with that, the governor was able to withdraw, in essence, $7.8 billion to apply towards that $54 billion shortfall. And then the plan ahead in the outgoing years is to draw upon the remaining balance of that, in essence, savings account at the state. Here I'm again highlighting, and you're going to hear me say cash deferral is going to be really key this year, and I believe they're here to stay for some time, given the economics at the state and how the recovery and with something we didn't all expect with the COVID, how that's going to be the balancing factor for budget for purposes is going to become our reality, I think, ongoing for the next few years. And so what the governor's budget includes is the authorization for the director of finance, the state director of finance, to basically reduce payments to K-12, to the local education agencies, as well as community college districts. And so you'll see here on the next slide what that timing looks like. But there's also this provision called trigger off. If there is any new monies that come in from the federal level through various stimulus acts, I know there's a lot of discussion on that, kind of been stalled. But if there is any movement on that, with the governor's budget has made the commitment that those dollars will be used towards relieving those first couple of deferrals, particularly the month of February. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that it's new monies for school districts. It just helps from a cash standpoint. So it helps eliminate those going forward. And what deferrals are, is what this table notes here, is basically it allows the state to move an expense. So let's say for 2021, what they will not pay the district, and it'll be noted here in a subsequent slide, and right now it's estimated about $130 million. The district, through the accounting process, can go ahead and book that revenue. That's reflected on the statement of activities. What most of us know is the income statement. And most of us always focus a lot is on the budget. That's where the income statement or that statement of activity comes to play. We as districts will be able to book that revenue at the end of the year via what's called an accounts receivable. By doing that, the state can push what that obligation, what we can reflect as revenues, they at the state level can push that, what that costs, what they would have given to school districts, they can push it into the next year, 21, 22. So they're moving it forward. That's why our income statement or statement activities you'll see here looks a lot better than June, but then it starts to create these cash issues in terms of if the district's not going to receive the apportionment, which is that revenue via the cash by the state, it'll make it a challenge to pay the day-to-day obligations. And what you'll see, many of the deferrals are going to go through February into May and even possibly June. That's kind of what this preliminary schedule, which is included in the governor's budget through the Department of Finance. And to kind of break this up, it's in essence, it's like as if it's saying, I'm going to give you a salary of $50,000 as an example for an employee, but I'm not going to give you a paycheck until 6 months out or even further along the line. It's been many, many years since many of us have seen this, but if you see the February amount here as an example, the February amount, and the district receives about $20 million on average a month based on the overall revenue allocation. That $20 million or portion thereof, I'll show in the next slide, will be deferred to November. So you're entitled to get that, but you're not going to see the money until November, months down the line. Same thing with March. March, you're not going to see that money until, and right now the projections are 100% based on the county guidance. So 100% of that $20 million we wouldn't see until October. And the same thing with the out years. And it's really unique in terms of how this is planned from a cash forecasting at the state level. But like April, we would see in September, May, we would see in August, and then June, we would see in July. We just experienced this just last month, actually June. In June, the district didn't receive any of its apportionment for the month. It was $30 million pushed into the month of July. We received it July 15th. So for fiscal year end purposes, we'll be able to record that revenue on the budget. We'll be able to show that, but it required the district in the month of June to go interfund borrow from other available resources to make our obligations such as payroll and vendor payments. And you'll see those details here in an upcoming slide. So this is going to be key. This is going to become a common. You're going to hear me focus more and more also on the cash. For school districts, the focus is always primarily on the budget. But from the business side of things, a lot of us on the accounting standpoint, we also look at the balance sheet. Balance sheet doesn't tend to be front and center with most educational agencies, but it will be. These deferrals force it to become the priority of looking at cash deferrals or cash position. And what this table indicates, and you can see some differences here because one of them is the guidance from the County Office of Ed, what they've provided to the 42 districts within the county of how to account for those deferrals in those particular months. So as an example, that $20 million that I mentioned earlier, 65% would be deferred to November. And then we're assuming, based on the county guidance, that all of these months, so imagine no paycheck for 4 months. So that's what we've had to build those cash flows that you have in your package, and we'll highlight here in a bit. Fact information, this is what we reviewed with the county office just recently. School Services of California has a lesser of a conservative approach, but you can see these numbers here, what School Services of California is indicating. And this is going to be an area we're going to have to be tracking month to month as we get new information from the State Department of Finance, from the County Office of Ed and others, because as cash receipts come in at the state level, they might free up additional dollars. These percentages might change to the better, or again, it could go the other way. But this is how we've built our assumptions for now. So it appears about $130 million of what the district's entitled to will be pushed out into the following year in terms of cash, getting that cash in the bank or the county treasury account. And so with that, we have to looking at that period of time, looking ahead for that last 6 months of the fiscal year. And in our conversations with the county have been, we're looking at all of our resources. We're going to have to interfund borrow. General fund, because the fact that the state is not going to be providing, let's say, that monthly paycheck, we're going to have to look to our other funds to help bridge that temporarily. And that is permissible under the Ed Code. And again, like I mentioned earlier, as the board took action of that 85% increase in that threshold, it's been 75%. And the state budget only allows that for now for those 2 years, 2021 and 21-22. So a year from now, we'll come back to the board because it also has the condition or the caveat that it does need to be a public hearing. So we'll bring that forward again a year from now to give the district the greatest flexibility when we need to borrow. The conversations with the county is, we have to look at all of our options. We cannot ask for an exemption of a deferral until all of your funds, you've exhausted everything in terms of the cash that you can borrow. And so, it's in essence saying, unless you got to that point of a state loan, and we know what the results are of that. But we have been having conversations with the county office about this. We're looking into California School Financing Authority. They had a call about a week ago that included John Gray from School Services of California and also Mike Fine from FCMAT to see if there are pools for them to go do a trans. So that way, which is a tax revenue anticipation note on behalf of school districts to help with that period looking ahead. But that's something we're exploring. If it is a viable option for the district, we'll definitely bring that forward to the board in the upcoming months. Again, this is just highlighting that cost of living adjustment, like I mentioned on the revenue side of things, was not included in the overall funding. The state legislature is indicating no cuts were made to education, but in essence, had that amount, that percentage been included in the funding for school districts, and particularly for Sweetwater, it would have been about $8 to $9 million. So that is in essence a loss in revenues because that was not included in that calculation. So the funding COLA is zero, and it is also zero for the out years. And what you can see by not putting in that COLA, these are modified base grants that are now included in that calculator for determining revenues for schools. So it's a significant decrease, just a slight decrease in terms of that funding. So the other factor that was included in the governor's budget, in the final enacted budget, was the pay down to help alleviate a little bit for school districts, was the contributions to Calpers for classified staff and Calstrs for certificated staff. This was already incorporated into our budget in June, what was adopted, in June. It's about $5 million amount that was already, because it was also already released by the governor in May. That was our latest assumption, so that we factored that in June. So there's really no change in terms of this 45-day in this area. The only key change came about when we have the multi-year projections. We do have some latest information here, so we were able to pull some of these details. And Calpers, as an example, made a slight change. So we incorporated that, but it was prospective in our future planning regarding the multi-year projections. The other factor that is different than what we had shared with the board, but again impacts more of our other funds, such as adult ed. At the time we were building the budget, and the guidance we received was that each of these programs, as an example, career technical education, adult education, the after-school education program, would be taking approximately perhaps about a 10 to 20% cut. Based on the governor's final budget, there was no change. So that's a fortunate thing in terms of our revenue staying static for the 2021 year. Again, something to look forward to see what will be the impact for the following planning year. There are some flexibilities that was provided to our after-school program in regards to attendance, hours, student staff ratios, et cetera. And that's what Dr. Alvarez, along with Ms. Griselda, are looking into as they're working with the programs to implement that. The other key change, which is actually a positive and is actually one item that remained since the governor's budget proposal back in January, and that was the proposal at the time, which then was included in the final enacted budget, was increasing the base rates to the special education local plan areas, which is known as our SELPAs. And so this particular amount, even though it's preliminary, it's the data we just received from the SELPA director, indicates that Sweetwater is anticipated to receive about $3 million in additional state funding, which is the AB 602 state funding. So with that information, we did incorporate that. It did help a little with our contribution from general fund. But again, it's until we get the final estimates. This right now is tentative until we receive that. If there's any other update, we'll be making that change at first interim. Okay. The next few slides here relate to the CARES Act, the Federal CARES Act, and also the component that was in the governor's budget related to learning loss mitigation associated with the component of the CARES Act. Let me just jump here to the next slide. So there's two parts of it. What we indicate as the direct stimulus, this is the one that we've been sharing with the board now since we received the allocations. I want to say it was late May. It was about $8.2 million. Those dollars need to be spent by September 2022. And then we have, these are the key areas right now in which the budget has been allocated to. It's about, and this is also reflected in the 45-day, these numbers. Primarily with personal protective equipment. We're working with the maintenance team in terms of those allocations and distributing that to school sites. There's also professional development, some required set-asides because it is federal dollars. We do have to, align to those private school allocations. There's technology, so the board took action recently on the student devices. So that's factored in there along with some indirects. So that's this particular component of CARES Act money. The other component is what is included in the governor's budget, and the allocations were just released by the California Department of Education about a week ago. It was one of our last final entries that we posted after confirming with the county that we would in fact include these amounts into this budget revision. And what's key is because yes, these are federal dollars, they are restricted, they're on the general fund side of that restricted monies. Those calculations are key when it comes to the general fund and how you calculate the economic uncertainties. And you're going to see that here in a subsequent slide, the slight uptick. And then also the set aside required routine restricted maintenance. And so that was guidance that the county provided the last day that we had to finalize the package. And so this here, in terms of this funding, these areas, unlike the other direct stimulus money, these must be spent by December 2020. I've inquired if there's any conversation at the federal level or the state level that might grant an extension, but at this point, we haven't heard of any. There's nothing at this point, so that's the current provision. So these dollars would need to be spent by this December. In order to also be in receipt of these dollars, we had to submit an online application to basically commit to those dollars, and that's been done. But it also has a requirement that Dr. Alvarez and her team are preparing a learning continuity plan that would need to be brought forward to the board by September 30th. That is one of the conditions of which, and it leads into of what needs to be included. I think I have it here on a subsequent slide. On this particular one, is just highlighting what was not in the budget, even though there were discussions from May to June of what we might see in there. There was, we had talked about one point about possible other funds, if there would be flexibility with sweeping of ending fund balances. That is not included in the budget. So at this point, these are excluded. The other key part about the budget relates to attendance and instructional minutes. So I just want to highlight that in regards to the funding, the number for the average daily attendance, that's where the hold harmless comes into play. The state is using the districts, it's considered the P2 data, was as of February of this past year. Mm-hmm. That number is going to be rolling forward the same status quo into 2021. It doesn't mean that down the road it may not change overall funding in the LCFF, but that student basis is what will go forward into this year. But there are different expectations, and like what, after the governor's provision in mid-March was that there are requirements for annual instructional minutes, and there are requirements for daily instructional minutes as well. And so that kind of leads into this, provides guidance, and it was Senate Bill 98 that provided a lot of these specifics on how to meet those instructional minutes, whether it's distance learning, hybrids, or in class. And here are some of the key takeaways in terms of what those standards look like, in terms of conforming and providing the specific standards required. And this too indicates here like weekly engagement, having that documented, because there will be, and we're going to await the audit guide, because that'll be the parameters, because they will enforce penalties if we do not comply with those requirements. In Senate Bill 98, there will be enforcement in terms of how that'll be accounted for. So there'll be some documentation. There'll be part of the fiscal year-end audit review we have with our external auditors. They'll be looking at that if you don't have properly documented attendance, the LCFF funding will be impacted. So something to be very mindful in this area. One other key item, and it had been noted in the governor's executive order months ago, is the local control accountability plan would be suspended. The Senate Bill 98 had a couple of other considerations in here, but most importantly goes back to the learning continuity plan. That is what needs to be adopted by September 30th. But however, we will still need to bring forward by December 15th the LCFF budget overview, which is one of the components of the LCAP plan. So again, a lot of moving pieces here related to that accountability aspect. And then here are the key elements regarding the learning continuity plan that Dr. Alvarez will be working with Cabinet and her team to pull the information together. These are the 4 key areas of the report. The template was just released this past week. And I know that her team's been working very closely on pulling that detail together. And so with that, providing, there was a lot of context, but it's important in how that then rolls into the district's budget. And so these next few slides, and this particular one here, notes what were all the variables that we had to look at. I shared with you the local control funding formula, the calculator there. We talked about the pension costs. We went over the CARES Act monies. We went over the special ed piece. One key factor, though not too material, but we did have to update our lottery numbers, went down just a little bit. It was about $153 per average daily attendance. That was reduced to $150, so we had to book that reduction in revenue. And then most importantly, as I mentioned, those cash deferrals We had to look and recalculate the cash flow statement based on the guidance from the county and what we know will be deferred. That will trigger additional borrowing costs that we had to incorporate into this budget and into the multi-years. What is very unique with the 45-day budget, it's always primarily focused on what the governor's budget has. But what's so unique for us and what we added into this plan was to incorporate, because these are significant changes, so we would have the latest budget to work with and to share with the board and the public. One key consideration, which is a benefit to the general fund for now, is the board took action. We had the public bid for the 3rd Avenue property in June. And then on the 27th, the board took action for the property sale agreement. That property sale agreement indicates that the transaction will close late this month. And with that being said, the proceeds of about $6.5 million or so go into that respective fund, Fund 40, where those funds go into. It will then have the available cash to make the September debt service or mortgage payment, if you will, for the Elf Street property. So with it having the cash in the treasury account, not needing in essence for the general fund to help cover that cash and the budget part of it, that $2 million that we had for 2021 and also the out years, that amount was reversed in essence, because that fund should be able to maintain that. Now, is there always risk possibly of the timing of the close of the transaction, but we do have it in escrow. And so we will monitor that very closely from now until September as to when that debt service payment is made, and with a cash obligation. So that's reflected. So that's actually a positive to the bottom line. And then the other component was with the various bargained agreements that we worked closely with all of our labor partners over the course of the last few weeks. A lot of the agreements, the board had either taken action on the MOUs as of July 27th, and then again tonight and under F7. And so those bargained agreements, those amounts, which again, those AB 1200 disclosure statements, which are tied to those bargaining actions, are reviewed by the County Office of Ed. And then we also have to provide, and that's in accordance with the government code. They review it, they get that 10 days prior to coming to the board, they review it and then provide acknowledgement and approval of those. And we've been attaching those letters to the agenda items, so they're for record. So those savings are included into the budget. The other key item that we did add back into the budget, which had been removed at the time of budget development, was based on the latest information that we received from CIF regarding sports, particularly the fall sports. If you recall, during budget development or budget adoption, about 75% of athletic stipends, as well as official fees, were adjusted because the latest information was we were not sure if that was fall sports were going to happen, if at all. And so based on the CIF communication that was issued a few weeks ago with Dr. Moore and his updates to cabinet, we do anticipate, or at least for now, I mean, that's what CIF is, that the fall sports are going to be merged into the spring timeframe. So we will have that in that second semester. So for now, conservatively, we've put those stipend costs back in and those official fees costs back in, and we'll continue to evaluate that. Once we get to first interim, we have more information from CIF as to whether or not the timing of sports resuming. But again, that's the purpose of the interims, is we keep the board and the public updated with these key financial considerations. And so with that, what we've presented here, and we had this during the governor or the budget adoption back in June to just show the magnitude of what I was calling the draconian revenue cuts to the district. So as you can see back here in June's budget adoption, we were looking at $355 million. Now in the governor's enacted budget, that's $390 million. This is the part I was saying that impacts the statement of activities, the budget, and it helps tremendously when we're looking at the budget. But you can see the swing, and hence why we're bringing much more detailed report to the board, also for the county's guidance. And so with that, we'll walk through each one of these columns and how that relates to those changes. So column A is the same as it was during the adopted budget back in June. This has remained static. These were our estimated actuals, is how we believe at that point in time and now, because our staff is still closing the books. We have not completed unaudited actuals that we will be bringing forward to the board in September. Based on that information that we knew at the time, we estimated that we would end positive. Now, if things are more favorable, that'll help. That'll help that beginning balance as it impacts our budget going forward. But at this point, until we close the books, we're keeping that estimate at this point. One key point to note here, just out of the line of audit adjustments. We are working with our external auditors, Crow. We anticipate having the 18-19 audit complete in the upcoming weeks. Two key factors that was pending that audit was the AB 139 report and the outcome of that report. And then also we've been spending a lot of time on the restating balances for the end of 2017-18. So those 18-19 beginning balances are accurate. And so when we restate it, it requires a lot of other further follow-up by the auditors, more testing, more analysis. The thresholds have been dropped significantly in an audit. So there's a lot of documentation that we've had to provide, but we do anticipate that coming forward to the audit subcommittee in the upcoming weeks for review, and then the board. If what those final outcomes are, those numbers, that would be then reflected here in this line. So again, column A is static. We wanted to provide as a point of reference. Column B was all of the work, given all the decisions that had been made up to that point prior to the governor's release of the May Revise. We were reflecting. It wasn't certainly enough to cover all of the economic uncertainties, but it was a much more favorable bottom line prior to the May Revise. So you can see here we're at 7.2. And this is just operating, looking at revenues coming in and expenditures going out. Then we have in column C, which is what the board adopted back in June, and that was the guidance we received from the county, was to use those assumptions from May Revise. Yes, it did not look very good. It was a negative $26 million, but that's what we posted at that point in time because of those variables, the assumptions we knew. Now, as you can see, the significant shift, and primarily because, again, of that revenue number. And so I'm going to go through some of these key line items to highlight what I had just shared. So from a revenue standpoint, that's a pickup. This is what I call the puts and the takes, or the pluses and the minuses when it comes to the financial statement. What you see here in like certificated line item with salaries, that's reflective of those bargained agreements. That's a positive. Same thing with the classified. We did have the CSEA and NAGE units. One thing to note, because you don't see much of a change, is because that's where those athletic stipends came back in. So we did pick up some savings, but we did have to put in back a budget for those athletic stipends. Then a few other things to note is then also the transfers out. So I mentioned earlier the $2 million with the contribution to Fund 40 to make that debt service obligation with that property sale. Then we've reduced that, so that's no longer noted on here. And then contributions has an element of the special ed revenues, so that's also reflected in here. And so at this point, we're showing a positive $13 million looking forward. And then putting it into perspective, this is now taking that same information for 2021, putting it in context with the out years, because we're required in any of these budget cycles to have our current year and then our 2 out years. And so what you can see here is that 13 million I mentioned earlier. So where I indicated why, again, the county, and why it's critical that when you have restricted general fund dollars, you have to factor it in, because it increases your economic uncertainty basis. So that 2% goes up. So you can see a little bit of a change from here to here in the next year, because these are one-time monies. We're not going to get that next year. So that's why then it goes back down the baseline for that calculation. And so with that, so even looking at 2021, and we have all these reserves to set aside, these are required reserves for various obligations, there's still a shortfall of about $3.5 million. So to be truly balanced, we would still need about 3.5. So in essence, our economic uncertainties, kind of that balancing number, is about 6.6 million. So we're not necessarily balanced at this point. Now, if the audit of the unaudited actuals comes in any way favorable, that'll be this number here. Hopefully can be adjusted upward, which will then chip away to this number. We'll continue to reevaluate this column as we come with the first interims, second interims, and so forth throughout the year as we get new information. Then as it relates to column B. So again, column B, that's where I mentioned there's that hold harmless in terms of the revenue. You see things stay kind of static in terms of the revenues piece of it because the governor's commitment to the ADA. But one thing I just want to, indicate, even though it shows a very minimal kind of shortfall here, assuming everything else stays static, the key thing to note is when we as a district and all districts receive that governor's budget come January, if there's any reduction to the local control funding formula, it's going to hit this number here, this revenue number. So I'm just trying to balance a little bit of this bottom line because it does look favorable. There's a lot of uncertainty here. As you can see here to the right, which we've noted, what we've been told and the guidance is assume 0%. And given the current environment with COVID where the economics are coming in at the state, that's the best and most prudent way to assume that for now. Now, if there's any increase, if things come in a little bit better and the COLA ends up being 1% for 2021, that'll certainly have a direct positive correlation to increase the revenues, and we'll reflect that at that time. But again, January is going to be key to get that latest information from the governor and what is factored in that. The other thing to note, and although it's enrollment, but really the enrollment of 2021, because of this hold harmless for average daily attendance, really comes into play is in the 22-23 year. Kind of looking ahead, it's where you see that drop of revenues, and then you see the shortfall that's projected, about 23 million. It's contingent, it's subject right now to these enrollment numbers. We're very early in that stage now with school starting on August 3rd. We're going through a period, what we call typically is the day 10. We analyze the enrollment on a daily basis. But given the recent MOU with the teachers union, we've extended that to 15 days. That gives schools and staff more opportunity to look and analyze at those days to make adjustments as needed. If enrollment numbers come in much more favorable, and again, as we look in our out-year projections, this number here of 37, because remember, we're a district in declining enrollment, you use that enrollment and average daily attendance, it then impacts your subsequent year. So again, there could be some movement, but I just want to preface it with a little bit of caution, just because there's a lot of moving pieces that could still impact these projections. Okay. So now kind of going to the borrowing piece of it, because we've showed how it looks like on the statement of activities, those deferrals that I mentioned about earlier, and what we even saw in June. So we're highlighting the June. When we had the $37 million deferral go into July, we had to go to these particular funds, Fund 25, Fund 35, to meet our obligations. And again, the Ed Code does allow for this, temporarily borrow for that purpose. So as soon as that deferral came in on July 15th, staff and management moved the monies right away back into these funds. And they'll have interest for the time that it was borrowed. That will be calculated and included as well for those earnings for that time period. So, but that's been made whole, so that's why we're noting 0. Then looking ahead, and based on our cash flows, even though there's going to be some deferrals in February, we anticipate, based on this latest information, we'll need to borrow starting in March, April, May, and then June. That's about $92 million it's going to need to be borrowed. We've used Fund 49. We understand a lot of consternation over that use of that fund. We've been in conversations with the county office. At this point, we'll utilize what other funds we have before we get to Fund 49. But at this point, the Ed Code does permit for that as long as it's within repayment timeframes. Repayment timeframes are that indicate, particularly here, if you're borrowing in the last 120 days of that fiscal year, you have the entirety of the next year. However, if we have to borrow in February, as an example, that February borrowing has to be paid before fiscal year end. So this is a key slide, key area that we're going to have to spend a lot of time on over the next few months, monitoring very closely. And this borrowing is separate and apart than what we have here on the right side. This is our traditional kind of working, what I call the working capital. When you have those shortfalls, again, of your traditional apportionments coming in and timing of payments and so forth. And we've been doing this as our second year. This is our way. We were shifting away from borrowing from the Melrose. Because if not, in essence, it would be almost the entirety of that Melrose, which would not be permitted. We've now, it's our second year working with the county office or county treasury, San Diego County Treasurer, for basically an advancement on taxes, property taxes. The board took action on that resolution in June. We've already received our $30 million distribution in July. They've already intercepted property taxes or supplemental property taxes. They've already taken that as a repayment. And we just got this past week the $30 million in August. We anticipate the next draw will be in October. But again, these are what we have, and this is static based on what we are working with the treasurer on. Okay, and the County Office of Education is included in all of these because they do have to approve the auditor transfers, and they have to be the facilitators with the county treasurer. Okay. So with that, I know there's a lot of information, but kind of looking ahead, there was a lot of conversation in the June timeframe of a possible August revision by the state. But a lot of the income tax receipts that came in July, the Department of Finance is analyzing that. If, in fact, things seem to be wildly off course, as noted on here, the state legislature will call a special session. We're not hearing anything at this point of a specific August revision, but anything is possible. And that's something for us to just have to kind of monitor very closely from now until, in essence, the next official budget check-in by the state is when the governor releases his January 10th budget. He releases it going forward for 2021, but if needed, and what many of us experienced this about 10 years ago, is mid-year cuts. I'm hoping it doesn't go that route, but that's when the governor would provide additional updates on the budget for current year and out year. And with that, if there are any questions, be happy to answer those.
Mr. Segura, would you like to hear the public comments at this time?
Yes, public comments, please.
The comments are from Nick Marinovich. Good evening again. Before my specific comments questions, I have two general statements. First, the quality, detail, and professionalism of the PowerPoint should be commended. Love the COVID-19 firecracker in 2020. Second, it is recognized that school districts have particular governmental budgeting challenges given their revenue is so dependent on state legislative action and not on somewhat predictable variables related to economic activity, such as sales and property taxes associated with cities. My comments are as follows. You might want to have the PowerPoint up as I will go by slide. This material, if not already done so, should be presented to the various parent groups and put in simple English Spanish of what it means for a child's education. Slide 11 is hard to understand without some context and explanation. It is recognized that it is tough to condense in a PowerPoint. Slide 19 indicates one-time money. Be wary about using this money to balance the budget and should be for one-time expenditures only. Slide 22, what is the way to document instructional minutes and the related criteria definition of instructional minutes? Parents need to know. Slide 27, suspension of the LCAP should not mean suspension of parental engagement. Slide 33 is, in my opinion, the key slide. It shows projected expenditures in excess of revenue for both of the next 2 fiscal years and a declining projected enrollment. There is still a structural deficit in this district. Fiscal year 22-23 has a projected net negative balance of $23.2 million. Slide 34, due to the budget deferrals, it is necessary once again to borrow from Melrose. I don't envy those who have to try and make payroll and cash flow given your lack of reserves. In closing, and as a member of the public, it would be helpful to have in simple written executive summary of what this all means so a parent could understand the challenges. I have a bit of an advantage given my professional background. However, it is tough no matter how good the PowerPoint and background to understand the implications of the material. There are no further public comments.
Thank you. Any members of the board want to comment on?
Yeah,
okay.
I got a quick question, Nick.
Yes, Mr. Pike.
Has the audit guide come out yet?
No, it has not. That's for 2021. We're awaiting that guidance. It usually takes a few months with various stakeholders at the state. So as soon as we receive that, we'll be reviewing the details.
Okay. So we already started school, so we're just waiting for the audit and hoping that we're going to be okay.
There are our team, and I'll defer to Dr. Aguirre or Dr. Alvarez. We are working through putting together that information so that way it's not an issue. We are tracking
Okay.
and monitoring that and documenting that. But we're not leaving it
Okay,
open for that time frame. But that will certainly give us some parameters, but we are working through putting some of that detail together. It was in part of the reopening plan as well.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Mr. Tarantino?
I think Mr. Solis was first,
Okay.
President Segura.
Mr. Solis?
Thank you, President Segura. I'm having some internet issues, so forgive me if I break up. Just with regards to our state and federal elected officials, what do you recommend that we tell them or ask for with regards to the funding?
I would recommend, I think, since we're on this particular slide, I think first and foremost is to give us, if there's flexibility, because if they're passing the issue of the cash part right to the school districts, because certainly if the state doesn't have the cash, then it trickles down and we're having to balance it, is to see if there's a way that these 120 days, because the concern is what if we had to borrow in February, like I mentioned earlier, this repayment period, if there is perhaps some flexibility with that. I mean, certainly covering it with interest during that time frame. And the other thing too is the funding for LCFF is trying to keep that intact as much as possible, because that's going to be the key risk for the next year is funding in terms of the revenue. I think those are the immediate areas. Yeah.
Appreciate it. That's it.
Mr. Tarantino?
Thank you, President Segura. I had a question that's related to all of this. In the resolution that we just passed, 2581, which we have provided for borrowing temporary transfer of funds between the general fund and other funds that we have. Is there an expectation that the funds be paid back with interest? I know that you mentioned that, but just to get it on the record. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because when we first took office way back in 2014, there was a lot of concern from the adult school department that our program back in 2011, I believe, that the state allocated the permission to go ahead and make the same budget transfers. And at that time, I believe we were told that the district took $2 million from the adult fund and never repaid it. So is there a provision in the current legislation or what's come down from the governor's budget that the money be repaid with interest to any fund that we borrow from?
So Trustee Tarantino, in terms of the question, we need to kind of separate it because it's two separate items. There's the cash part of it, and then there's the budget part of it.
Okay.
So let me address the cash part first. So the cash part, the provision is noted here in this education code, 42603. This point 1 was just added by the state, was about the borrowing, because when it goes to borrowing, it only looks at what cash do you have in the bank account, basically, the county treasury. If you need it for purposes of making certain payments, that's where this provision comes in.
What's that noise?
So from that's the cash component of it. You have to repay back, and that's what the issue was a couple years ago with the 2017-18 year because of the cash borrowing of the other funds. That allows under that resolution, if we needed to go again, the adult fund, this capital facilities like we did here, Fund 35, that's allowed to get cash, but you have to pay that cash back. You can't use it to overspend. It doesn't give you additional revenue appropriations. That's very clear. That's the education code that has to be addressed and paid back. Now, the other part to kind of separate is the adult school, from what I understand from a couple years ago, is that's the budget part of it. That allows for, which was allowed, that was that flexibility I mentioned a little bit earlier, that was in place in 2011, when it allowed for any budget remaining positive fund balance. You could take that and it basically give credit to the general fund and not repay that back. That was permitted back during that time frame. It wasn't just adult fund, it was a lot of the categorical fundings. It was known as the Tier 3 flexibility. Again, like I mentioned, there was conversation in May and June, but in this governor's budget, that cannot be done.
Okay.
So if whatever
Thank you.
end of the year for adult fund, they have that in their budget.
Thank you for the clarification. I really appreciate it, Dr. Salkel. Then nice job on the PowerPoint. Nice job, as always.
Thank you.
That's all I have, President Segura.
Thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Trustee Hall.
Thank you, President Segura. Yes, I'm kind of looking through this. I've tried not to ask all the questions, but on page 20, I just wanted to confirm, is it where it says CDE allocation, is that our total money that we expect, the 2.4 and the 7.8 and the 15 million in the green, or is that something else?
Correct. No, correct. The CDE, the Department of Education, released a little over a week ago the allocation based on each of these categories, and this is the basis of how that funding, and there's a spreadsheet on their website that groups these items by resource and the basis of how that was calculated. And they have it in these three.
So that I get it, but I mean, does that mean it's Sweetwater Union High School District allocated that much money, or is that because that CDE allocation doesn't really mean anything to me? It's the money that we were allocated
To Sweetwater directly based on the CDE's
All right.
allocation.
Thank you. That clarifies what I wanted to know. The other page I had on the instructional minutes, I would request of Dr. Aguirre to provide us a summary of what, because I know there's SB 78. Dr. Alvarez kept bringing that to our attention when we were having the board workshop on distance learning. But I understand that there's a SB 98, a Senate Bill 98, I guess, and a SB 99, and then some letters to the, I think you even have it here in your Senate and Assembly letters to the Journal. Not only that, but I believe there was a letter from the governor to the Journal that all kind of clarified more the information how you might hold distance learning and the instructional minute requirements. So if we could get that in a Friday update to the board, a summary of what all that means, I think it would be very helpful for us as we move forward and monitor what's going on and talk to our elected officials. So that what I would really appreciate. And then on slide number 32, I was looking at the 45-day revision, and we know that the bargaining agreements brought in some savings, the continuation of furlough days, et cetera. So could you kind of break down what happened on the classified salaries? Maybe send that in a Friday update to the board. In the interest of time, I'd like to understand what happened, where there was an increase rather than a decrease in, and also on the contracted services side, that went up slightly by about $70,000, it looks like. So I appreciate understanding that. And could you tell me, I'm kind of not sure what is line 20 on this slide, the contributions? What is that? What is that?
The contributions are the items in which special education is considered a restricted resource, routine restricted maintenance is a restricted resource, and there's a few other items in which those particular funds need general fund to help balance their operations. So for special education, as an example, it's about 60 million or so. Then with routine restricted maintenance, that's a requirement that we put 3% aside of total general fund, unrestricted and restricted combined. That's about 14 million or so. So those are the amounts to get us kind of close to that 73-ish. I think it's more like 74, but we've made some adjustments to special ed.
So this is both unrestricted and restricted, or is this just unrestricted that we're looking at on this page?
Just unrestricted.
Okay.
So unrestricted in your packet, you have the restricted side as well, because we have to provide.
Right. Okay. That's where I was confused because it doesn't really call that out on the slide. So I appreciate that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you go to slide 20, back to slide 20 for me? So could we just get an update going forward on how that money's being spent and being spent down and the plans for that?
At this point, there is no plan yet until the learning continuity plan comes forward to the board in September.
Okay, good, because I was hoping I didn't miss that.
Yes, there is no budget plan at this point until the team, instructional team and cabinet bring that forward to the board in next month.
So when we do get it, if we could, get updates on that, maybe on monthly, every other month, just to see how that spending's going. I'd appreciate that. And then could you go to page 33? So our QZAB will go off. That's it. It's due this year, right? And then from there, that's something we inherited. 15, the $5 million, and we've been carrying that for a long time.
The QZAB is from 2005. That obligation went into effect, and the maturity is actually September 2021. So you're required at the end of this fiscal year to have those dollars earmarked so that when that comes through for payment. So we reviewed this with the county quite often. And so, yes, that obligation is from 2005. That'll pay that maturity off, and that's why you do not see that in the out years.
Great. And then lastly, could you go to page 11? So just curious on, why there's the difference in the guidelines, the guidance from SDCOE and, SSC, or just, I know 130 million is, is the estimated cash referral, but just, what's the difference and what does it mean with the two different percentages from each organization?
Again, each one has their own interpretation and their own position. From our standpoint as a school district, we take the guidance from the county office when they're conservative. They're looking at these percentages because of that unknown factor going forward. So looked upon as more prudent to plan that cash, assuming it's not going to be there. And again, okay. Each organization has different perspectives. So
okay, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, was because we got to expect it's not going to be there. And so, great. That's all I have. Any more questions? Paula has another one. And thank you for the presentation, Dr.
Thank
Sokal.
you.
That was great.
First of all, I do want to thank Dr. Sokal. It's very good to have all the information, and your explanation as you went through it is very well. It's really great to have that kind of expertise. Very good. I just wanted to understand about how you're working to find out if there's a possibility of doing trans and joining at the state. I think there's a couple of different groups that are working to have statewide for school districts, the trans borrowing, and when you might find out if that's a possibility that we could participate in. When do you expect to hear about that? Because it's my understanding, if we go that route, if it's an open door for us to do that, we would need to pass a resolution as a board by December in order to be able to do that. So I think that it's easy with all these other issues going on and so much on the plate for us to lose sight. I just want to make sure I understand what you believe the timing will be. And
First and foremost, the district at this point, and this is why, as you see on this particular slide with the treasurer borrowing, that we have not, as a district, we have not been able to go to the financial market to go and finance a tax revenue anticipation note. It's a trans. The key factor is with the trans, whether it's a short-term financing. It's just like when you go out for a bond, you have to prepare an official statement. And this particular official statement is focused primarily on the general fund because it is a general fund obligation. With the pending, we have the AB 139 report, we have the pending SEC inquiry. At this point, disclosures are not something that we're in that position to do. And hence why we've gone to the county treasurer and they're granting this exception. Because this is not typical. Per the county treasurer, they're doing this based on some of the policy they have since 2013, because we've exhausted all of our options, so they're helping. So with that in mind, we are looking, California School Financing Authority is looking into a trans pool. The California School Boards Association is looking into a trans pool. But keep in mind, both of those are also public offerings. They will need to have official statements done. How that will translate with Sweetwater being a participant in that pool, the related disclosures, those are the things that we're inquiring on. We've got a meeting we're scheduling here soon with the California School Financing Authority to determine, along with their financial advisor and others, to see is that something that is a viable option. I don't know at this point, but yes, if it is viable, we would need to have that in place with board action because, again, it's a financing, even though we're not doing it independent, so as a part of a pool, there's going to be criteria that these entities are going to require.
I do understand that. I was hoping you might have an idea on when you will have more information on that.
It'll be the next few months or so. We are trying to get a meeting with the representatives by the end of this month. So hopefully by next month, we'll see once they review and they consider it as an option. I'm hoping by September, no later than October, if that's an option.
All right, thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that concludes K2. I believe there's no action on this, just a report. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. I say we take a 10-minute break and come back at 8:15.
Okay.
All right. See you at 8:15.
repeat again.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so let's move to M1.
Yes, I have 2 speakers on this item. The first comments are from Matt Dixon. Matt and Kimberly Dixon. Thank you for moving forward with the plans for the Mar Vista pool. As parents, we ask that you parallel process the new pool build while keeping the old pool open and available for student use. The pool is an essential asset to not only Mar Vista, but to the entire South Bay community. We ask that you minimize the time the students may be left without a pool, as to minimize the impact on athletics and organized sports. We ask that you consider the importance of keeping the old pool open as long as possible during the construction process. The next comments are from Nick Marinovich. My opposition to this project is not a secret. To spend over $15 million on an aquatic center when there are so many other facility needs within this district is unbelievable bad public policy. I have personal suspicions on why this project was pushed so hard as part of the ill-fated 2018 bond measure and the decision to hide the true condition of the general fund. Moreover, the state constitution states that bond funds are supposed to be spent on a specific list of projects found in the bond measure. There is no such project listed in Prop O for Mar Vista High. When I asked Crow in a January bond oversight meeting how they could find the audit of the bond program in compliance, i.e. spent on projects listed in the bond measure, I got a non-answer. I sure hope there are no health, life, safety items that were not funded that result in injury or worse, death that could have been corrected rather than spent on this project. That will be on your watch. Finally, this massive amount of information in the attachments is daunting and should have been partially shared somehow with the CBOC. Par for the course now. Who was on the evaluation committee for proposals? Also, Rudolph Sletton was the contractor for the downtown San Diego courthouse expansion. Do the Google search and delays in opening and construction problems. I am sure this will be a wonderful project. Perhaps you could invite the parents, say at Granger Junior High, to the grand opening to see how their hard-earned money was spent. There are no further comments.
Thank you. Was there going to be any staff discussion about this? Or comments? And just because it was pulled, I just for clarification.
Yes, President Segura. I'll ask Ms. Janea Quirk to present the project verbally.
Good evening. Thank you. So what you see tonight in front of you is a twofold approval. One is the completion of the RFP process for the DB selection for Rudolph and Sletton. And then the second part of that is their contract that we're bringing forward so that we can move forward. Within the design build process, one of the things that happens is we actually build the scope to which we are ultimately going to design and construct. And so within that process, as it's indicated in the board document, we had 4 what we call team collaboration meetings with both of the entities who were competing within the RFP. And that process helps us refine the scope of the work in alignment to the funds that we have for the project. And so, and then at the end of each one of those sessions, our district team, which is comprised of district staff, site staff, athletics, the swim coach and water polo coach. We had a representation from the director of aquatics at Coronado was with us, plus the design build bridging document team, which was Councilman Hunsaker and R&T. We would spend time after each one of those sessions and digest all of the information that was provided to us, and then send out any appropriate addendas and or clarifications for the purpose of both of the teams having equal understanding of the project and where we are moving in terms of the completion of their submissions for their SOQs to us. We then, at the end of their written document presentation, we also did a 2-hour or an hour interview with each one of those teams, refining or going through their final presentation to us as a district, and then ultimately selected to proceed forward with Rudolph and Sletton. Where this puts us right now is that we're essentially just a couple steps away from what would be the equivalent of about 30, probably well over pushing like the 50 to 60% of schematic design. So we have a very clear foundation of where the project is. We are on track and we have meetings already in place for this next week once we receive hopefully approval for tonight for us to proceed, that we will pull that team together, do some validation with the scope with the school site as well, verify the floor plans and the locations of the pool and some other elements of the project. And then we will be moving steadfast straight into design with submission to DSA right after the first of the new year, with construction on track to start going into summer of 2021. So does anybody have any questions on any of that?
Have any questions from board members?
Okay, so I just wanted to affirm that we're moving forward with the 50-meter pool. It is actually staying in its existing location, and one of the things that this team will do, we'll want to start that communication process with the community and with the school site as quickly as we can once we get the green light for us to proceed forward. So one of the things we'll be talking in this next week about, getting out renderings in the beginning, representation of what the facility, the pool will look like, the ceramics facility, and the elements of the adjacent ROTC that's going to be supported and have some impacts and improvements to it as well. So that everybody has a visual understanding of where the project is headed as we proceed. Okay. Thank
you.
Sure.
So I'll just say I'm super excited to see this project get going. Our community, definitely utilizes that pool, the existing pool, and I know this new pool will be, it'll be a place where there'll be a lot of community usage, and for our students and the whole community at large. I know Rudolph Slutton, they're a quality general contractor, and they're doing the design build process in this with this build, but I've actually worked with them on many Kaiser projects. They're a solid company, and I know they'll do a fine job with all this stuff. So I really look forward to this project getting going.
Thank you. I do want to take an opportunity to send a quick shout out to Armando Murillo. He's the project manager, and this has been a 4.5 year in the making project for him. And he's put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this, and I think that he definitely deserves some acknowledgement, some accolades for his hard work to bringing this project where it is today. So I wanted to say thank you to Armando for his efforts to date, and where that will continue to go as we move through this project.
Absolutely. So then we'll need to accept the selection of RNS as the best value design build team for RFP 90-2734-AM, Mar Vista High School Aquatics Facility and Central Campus Modernization, and approve the not to exceed design build contract with Rudolph and Slutton Inc. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Solis has his hand up.
Yeah.
I'll second, but I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that we just didn't go over or briefly the other things that are going to be built. So can we get a little bit more info? I know we said ROTC building, but could we say what's going to happen with that area?
So thank you for the question. So it's the 50-meter pool and the deck with the associated aquatic support building. So there's classroom space in there, there's restrooms, there's concession. It's important to note with the restroom and concession that those are actually going to be dual purpose and designed in a fashion that they're full utilization from the stadium as well, to offset some need that the site has in terms of that. The photovoltaic system will be in place. The modernization of the 600 and 603, which is the ceramics classroom, taking you back a few years. It's a 2-classroom building, and we built out the special education suite several years ago. And we're going to go back and complete that building, so that will be completed as well. And then there's a marquee that's going in addition to, and then some site lighting and overall site work. With regard to ROTC, we are not actually relocating ROTC. They will continue to remain in their existing facility, and then we're going to be doing enhancements to their outdoor courtyard and drill areas.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure, thank you.
Very good questions. So I'll say Mr. Pike made the motion, and I'll say Paula has her hand up. Yes?
Yes, I just wanted to say on behalf of the Imperial Beach community, but not only Imperial Beach, our other schools in this area, Southwestern, San Ysidro, well, maybe not Montgomery because they have the Y, but there's a lot of schools that access this pool and will be utilizing it. And some of the most vulnerable students will have a place to go to be off, really in a good environment. And I think that I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your second too, Paula. So we'll call for the vote.
Actually, Mr. Solis seconded.
Yeah,
I was going to let Paula have it because, it is her school, but, it's okay.
That's all right. I'll let Mr. Solis have it. I just am very appreciative because it has been a long time. It's been several years. I mean, Hilltop and Sweetwater and Bonita, you know what I mean? Things
Yes.
have happened all along the way. So it's really from my community, from the students and staff. I just want to express our sincere thanks for this. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's call for the vote.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
M2?
Yes, I have one speaker. Comments are from Kathleen Cheers. My comment relates to the Hilltop Field, the project that keeps on sucking money out of our bond fund. Who would have thought? No, one would have expected this board just might have begun to ask questions when a certain community member named Cheers raised the cautionary flag about this project several years ago. However, in true form, you all knew better, and here we are still sinking money into a field which should have been made whole years ago. As a little reminder, this was a PLA project. The same PLA that was supposed to bring quality and cost savings to all of our projects. Perhaps if our bond oversight committee would have been given the opportunity to meet with our highly paid, not sure for what, PLA coordinator, he might have been able to explain this issue. It is time for the taxpaying public to be given a clear, precise answer. What is the problem with the field? There are no further comments.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve, ratify M2.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
You can have it, Frank.
Okay, thanks, Arturo.
Moved by Hall, seconded by Tarantino.
I think.
Yes.
Vote, please.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
M3.
Yes, I have comments submitted from Kathleen Cheers. I would like to thank Mr. Murillo for his oversight on this project. Undoubtedly, his take charge style played a major role in the savings. There are no further comments.
Thank you. I'll accept a approval ratification of the change orders for this for M3.
So moved. So
I'll second.
Moved by Solis, seconded by Hall. Vote, please.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
N2.
And 2, I have comments submitted from Kathleen Cheers. Once again, I would like to acknowledge Mr. Williams and his staff for this detailed RFP. For several years, Ms. Adato, Mr. Marinovich, and I have shared concerns relative to our fire sprinkler and alarm system. Several years ago, our research revealed many, as in many, issues with our fire alarms, which, fortunately, were admitted to and corrected. My research indicates this is a new vendor, which identifies the fact Sweetwater is actively pursuing new companies which offer improved services. Mr. Williams, please take this time to acknowledge your staff and their excellent proactive work ethic. There are no further comments.
I'll make a motion to accept the RFP for N2.
Second. Solis.
Move the second. Any questions? Any discussion? All, vote please.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Q1.
Yes, I have comments from Elvia Estrella. I rise today in support of Resolution 4685, identifying September 15th to October 15th, 2020, National Hispanic Heritage Month. I also respectfully request that the board consider making this to be an action item and developing an equity plan identifying how we can overcome the historical educational disparities of our Latino students. I understand that now more than ever, representation matters, and it matters for our Latinx community. Our school district serves approximately 73% of Latinx students. I find it to be incumbent on us as educators to celebrate the riches and accomplishments of our Latinx history and community, as well as creating an educational environment that breeds a pathway towards success for our Latinx students. As we have witnessed the negativity towards our Latinx community in the national political climate, from the rejection of DACA students, politically charged statement identifying Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists, detention centers housing kids in cages, to a Latinx congressional representatives being ridiculed by the president with comments of hate stating, "Go back to the county you came from." Our students need to hear the riches of our culture and to know that we are an educational institution that will breed an environment that will foster hope and success for our students. As a Latinx educator, I understand statistically that Latinx students, specifically Mexican, have the lowest educational attainment rates in high school and higher education compared to any other racial group. This statistic hasn't escaped my mind since I entered college, and sadly, it hasn't changed much over the years. This July 2020, the UC system identified our Latinx students as the first time ever to be the largest group of Californians admitted, and some of those students were from Sweetwater. We need to continue to celebrate these successes and reinforce to our Latinx students that they can achieve in education. Most importantly, we need to continue to reinforce to our Latinx students that they have options, whatever their choice may be. More recently, in a forum that Dr. Fulcher hosted, I heard a comment made stating that, quote, "This district only caters to the Latino community." My Lenovo was crashing and I couldn't identify who made the comment. However, it saddened me to not hear a follow-up comment from the facilitator uniting us, but rather silence that further divided our communities before my Lenovo crashed. I strongly feel the need for a district equity plan identifying the needs of every community of color to build successes, and not entertaining comments that pit us against each other to further divide our communities of color. We see in the times of COVID-19, the death rates are highest in our Black and Brown communities and the necessary medical recourses not being rendered to our communities of color. We don't want to see that in our educational system and this community. As a child of immigrant parents, the strength in my cultural identity was the only thing that provided me the tenacity to know and understand that I mattered in a system that statistically said I would fail rather than succeed. Our Latinx students in our community need to know and understand that they matter and that we as a district will set up the structures to support that success. I support this resolution, but respectfully request to reconsider this item to be an action item to serve our Latino students. There are no further comments.
Thank you. Comments from the board? So I would just add, I agree with Elvia, and I would, ask that we could, come up, Dr. Getty, we come up with an action plan or whatever we can do to do a number of the things she listed. I'd be more than happy to participate in that and go from there. I think that's very important. I could tell you that the strength in my cultural identity and my awareness that I learned in college helped to get me to where I'm at today. I can say that's why I'm sitting here. And I think if we could help our students understand where they come from and inspire them to do great things, would benefit not only students but our community. So maybe we can come up with something. We could brainstorm that. Anybody else? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mrs. Hall has her hand up.
Oh, Mrs. Hall.
Yes, I just wanted to say I agree with you, but it's also not just beneficial to the students who may be, immigrants or children of immigrants or of Latinx heritage, or the students that are Filipino heritage or are Black African American. It benefits all the students, even especially the white students who interact and who understand and who learn from those different teachers, those people, the students that they're engaged with in their classrooms. It benefits all of us. So I totally support it. I think what Ms. Estrella has said is, I mean, Dr. Estrella, I believe she has a doctorate now, so is really spot on. So thank you for that, President Segura.
Thank you, and I agree with you, Trustee Hall.
Yeah, I agree, and I'd like to move that we adopt the resolution and look into an equity plan.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Call for the vote.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Ike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
So that's everything.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I would say we're adjourned, and good night, everybody. See you in a month, in a couple weeks. Not a month, a couple weeks.